Hello and welcome to another episode of the Women of Faith in Leadership podcast. This is episode 73, and in today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about 10 signs that your workplace culture is toxic. So let's do it. Leading as a woman is tough, but leading as a woman of faith is next level. However, it doesn't have to be that way. God has called you into this leadership role because He says you are worthy. You are His child, and if He qualifies you, who in this world can unqualify you? You might suffer from imposter syndrome and believe you're not good enough, but God says you are good enough. Hi, I'm Rika, Whelan, Christian leader and workplace culture coach, and together we're going to navigate leadership with faith as our foundation. Let's get started. Grab your coffee or water, keep that notebook and pen handy, and let's jumpstart your leadership. Okay, so if you've ever worked in a workplace that has a toxic workplace culture, you'll know exactly that yucky, icky feeling that you get by working in a toxic workplace environment. And it's got to do a lot with relationships and relationships between people in particular. And it's these relationships that really form the workplace culture. Now, there's a lot of things out there, advice for leaders on how they can create a excellent workplace culture. But I think, like anything that I do believe in, you do need to know where to start or what you're looking at before you can make plans to improve on that. And so in an upcoming episode, I'll also be sharing with you 10 ways on how you can improve your toxic workplace culture. But before we can do that, we need to look at 10 ways or 10 things red flags really, that you can use to identify whether you've got a toxic workplace culture or not. Now, these 10 things, are not exhausted. It is not an exhaustive list. There might be 100 things more that could constitute a toxic workplace culture. But these are the 10 things that I decided to speak to you about on this particular episode. And I will also quickly, very briefly, share a little bit more about each and some of the experiences or examples that I've had as well. Now, before we jump in, I'd like to personally invite you to come and join the discussion on the Women of Faith in Leadership community, which is hosted on Facebook. So you can go to womenoffaithinleadership.com and follow the links there, or you can go to Facebook and search for Women of Faith in Leadership community. And I ask a couple of quick questions before you enter the group. These questions that you answer will inform the future podcast episodes. So that's why it's important that I capture those answers, but I also capture your email address so that I can email you if I do address your question on the podcast. So yeah, go and join. I'd love to see you there. And I'd love for us to just start a community of women of faith that are in leadership so that we can support each other. Okay, so let's jump into these 10 things. Now, the first thing that I'd like to highlight, number one, is a lack of respect. And so there's this can really manifest in many, many, many ways. But, lack of respect can look like, bullying each other, harassment, simple disregard for opinions or boundaries, or even just a childish little thing like rolling your eyes when somebody else is speaking. This is a lack of respect towards each other. And so there's many other ways that you can show disrespect to someone. Let's say, for example, as a leader, you give your team instructions and you've got that one team member that purposefully does the opposite thing of what you said because they don't respect you. It's a similar thing that if you're a middle manager and you've got a line manager who's giving you instructions or something that you need to convey to your team, but you really don't want to because it's a tough message, or you really feel like it should actually be your line manager's role and you just disregard what they say, you don't hold that meeting, you don't send that email, and that is a total disregard of what someone has said and then disrespectful. So in our household at the moment, we've got a teenager, and the one thing that we talk about a lot is respect. Our teenager doesn't quite seem to understand when she's being respectful or disrespectful. So there's a lot of, let's rather not do that. Don't say this, rather say that in the house. And so one of the upcoming episodes, I'll also share with you ways that you can help your team to understand what is respectful or disrespectful, because sometimes in different cultures as well, people do not understand in certain cultures when they're being respectful or disrespectful. So I've learned as well, immigrating to a country where it is very, very, very diverse with different cultures. So the second thing I'd like to highlight when it comes to toxic workplace culture is poor communication. So there's this expectation that people should just know what's expected of them. There's a lack of communication regarding anything, really, for that matter. And this can be from the moment you step into that role as part of the onboarding process, or just a lack of communication between team members, lack of communication from your line manager to you. You struggle with communication yourself, therefore you don't communicate with your team. Or maybe you communicate, but you only communicate via email. You don't ever verbally communicate with your team. Or you only communicate verbally, but you don't follow it up with an email. There could be unclear expectations, like I mentioned already, or a culture of secrecy, or a gossip, or so many other things when it comes to communication. So again, in an upcoming episode, I'll share with you how you can fix this poor communication and how you can turn this red flag into a green flag. The third thing that I'd like to highlight is an unrealistic workload. So when your job description, for example, says that you should, or your contract says that you should be working 38 hours, but you end up working 70 hours a week, then you know that that is just wrong. It's just wrong. And sometimes workplaces have these expectations of us. The contract says 38 and you get paid for 38 hours or for 40 hours for the week, but you end up doing 65 hours or 70 hours. And so I've got first-hand experience with this. And it's that no, my line managers never told me that the expectation was that I should be working 70 hours a week or 60 hours a week, 20 hours more than what I was contracted to do. However, there was an extremely great culture of leadership and a culture of high performance at that workplace. And in turn, I felt like I should be performing really well and I should be a high performer. And therefore, I put in all the additional time. No one was expecting of me to do that. So I think, even if you've got a high performing team or even if things are going really well, we should be mindful of those people who are working themselves to death or working themselves to burnout, because that's what happened to me in the end. I struggled with boundaries. So unrealistic workload could also include those boundaries, lack of boundaries. But also if you're working overtime, it's expected that you work overtime then from your line manager. So on the opposite end, you are actually expected to work overtime, but you're not compensated. Or, for example, you are expected to attend a meeting after hours, but you're not compensated with money, you're compensated with food. No, that is definitely not okay. And your team members will definitely start resenting you and the organization. And as time goes on, that negativity will start festering, which would then add to this negative workplace culture or this toxic workplace culture. 4 is a lack of work-life balance. Again, those boundaries. There's no boundaries in place. Employees are expected to constantly be available. And this will definitely create an unhealthy workplace culture. So if you and your team do not have a break from each other because you're constantly being on Microsoft Teams with each other or on Slack or wherever you're in constant communication with each other, just know that although your team are very dedicated to do that, and as are you, this can be problematic because it just does not create work-life balance, and your team does not know how to shut off, and so do you. You do not know how to shut off, which means that, again, like the previous point, it's going to lead to burnout because you do not have any work-life boundaries. So the fifth thing that I want to mention, the fifth red flag, is favoritism and cliques. And so you can easily see when you join a new environment or when you are the new leader that there are little cliques that have already formed and that people are being favored. And so there's also a common misconception that just because somebody's getting friendly with the boss, then they must obviously be the favorite, or that this person's a heel licker, like they said in Holland. Basically, this person's trying to, gain the favor of their leader. And so this is definitely not good. You also, under this, also can fall something like nepotism, where leaders are favoring their family members. And this happens quite often in bigger organizations where you've got CEO, where their children will be taking over their role. And so obviously those children are favored above anybody else because they're expected to continue the family business. So although I understand that they need to learn the ropes, but sometimes it can look unfair towards team members that those children, or those people who haven't even worked, maybe haven't even studied, haven't done their due diligence, how they get favored or even paid more than what other people are. So be mindful of that. So the sixth one is gaslighting. Now, gaslighting can actually be seen as a form of emotional abuse, making the victim, or basically then your employee, feel as if they're not good enough. They feel as if nothing that they do is correct, and they feel as if they just have no self-worth, no self-confidence, nothing of the sorts, because of how they are made to feel at work. And so we've got to be careful here. Gaslighting is 100% a part of a toxic workplace culture. And under this is also bullying. So, people bullying each other, making each other feel bad, or putting each other down, demeaning, degrading, devaluing. And so we've got to be very mindful. If you see any of that type of behavior in your workplace, then that is 100% a toxic workplace environment. Now, just remember something that I want to say here midway is that you won't necessarily see all 10 of these things, but you might only see one of these things. And then you need to be on high alert and address this one issue ASAP to ensure that it doesn't turn into this full-blown toxic work environment where everybody just wants to quit. So even if you only see even one of these things, please do something about it immediately. And so number 7 is a lack of recognition and appreciation. So I mentioned this with, that lack of work-life balance and unrealistic workload, or it was, unrealistic workload. Basically, you are expected to work all of these hours, or you do the expectation on you is extremely, extremely high for everything that you have to do, but you never get recognized for it. Or your line manager never even says thank you to you. So think about your employees. Go and have a look at what your employees are doing and whether you are giving them due recognition for everything that they're doing. Do you say thank you at the end of every single day before you go home? Thank you very much for all the work that you've done today. A simple thank you at the end of every day can really, really, really change your relationship with your employees. Yes, it does feel silly that to say thank you at the end of every single day, and you have to then say, let's say there's 200 working days in a year, you say thank you to that person 200 times. But just think about what it will do for your relationship with that person if you actually say thank you at the end of every single day. People will start missing it at the end of the day when you don't say it anymore. And so that thank you can go a far way. Sometimes we do want to say thank you with like a morning tea, a thank you with gift vouchers, spa gift vouchers, or staff member of the month, or whatever, and that's fine. But I think we should start with a simple thank you, and then we can build it up from there. So the next thing, number 8, is a negative and pessimistic atmosphere. And, watch out for those energy vampires walking around your organization or your department, just sucking the life out of everyone because of their pessimistic viewpoint, or negative and pessimistic viewpoint. So you 100% will be able to identify who I'm talking about right now in your organization, that negative person walking around. It's like just the spirit walking around and sucking the life out of everyone. So, absolutely watch out for that. And you should be very, very mindful. If you have people like that, you should be keeping them accountable, and you should be addressing them immediately as well. Do not leave it. Even if that person refuses to change, well, then you will document every single time that you've asked that person to change, and then you will move into performance management. So, I want to be careful not to give the whole next episode away already. But definitely if you see negative or pessimistic atmosphere, that is a very big red flag that you will end up, or if you don't already have, but you will definitely end up with a toxic workplace environment. Number 9, unhealthy competition. So this is where people cut each other's throat, not physically, but they're literally willing to hurt each other and to get each other in trouble, or to step on each other just to get to the top. And so be very mindful of this. If you see this type of behavior, then you know that you are heading downhill and something needs to be done about it. There should be healthy competition, and if a person loses, they should be able to cheer the other person on and be happy for them, instead of being disappointed or storming out or quitting or whatever there is. So unhealthy competition is definitely not good, because that can also foster mistrust and resentment amongst the team. And then the final one I'd like to share is the lack of ethical behavior. So I've talked a lot about integrity on this podcast and how important integrity is for us as leaders. So if there's a lack of integrity, there's a lack of honesty, there's a lack of doing the right thing all the time, whether somebody's looking or not, then you know that, or red flag, toxic workplace environment in making. So be mindful of that and definitely address it as well ASAP. And look, integrity is something that you can't teach someone. You can talk about it all the time, but intrinsically, they have to make the decision to do the right thing all the time, whether somebody's looking or not. You cannot force integrity on them, but what you can do is you can force the consequences of not having integrity. You can make sure that there are sufficient consequences and accountability in place if they don't have integrity. Okay, so those are your 10, and I'll quickly just repeat them. Number 1, lack of respect. 2, poor communication. 3, unrealistic workload. 4, lack of work-life balance. 5, favoritism and cliques. 6, gaslighting. 7, lack of recognition and appreciation. 8, negative and pessimistic atmosphere. 9, unhealthy competition. And 10, a lack of ethical behavior. And so I'd like to just finally remind you about the Facebook community. Come and join us in there. We're a very intimate and small community at the moment, so I'd love to expand that and get all the listeners on there on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, let me know. Then we can connect somewhere else. But LinkedIn, maybe come and follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And I do publish a newsletter there, but the newsletter also goes out on email. So that's the end of the episode, and thank you so much for listening. And stay tuned for part 2, where I'm going to share, I've already given a little bit of that away, but I'll expand on that in greater significance in part 2. But first up, next week, we've got another conversations about gossip. And I'm really excited about the guest that I have on the show next week. And then the week after, I'll be sharing part 2 of this episode. So I'm going to be keeping you in suspense. Come and join us in the Facebook community if you haven't done so already. All right, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to chatting with you again very, very soon. Bye. Thanks so much for listening. If this podcast blessed you in some way, the number one way you can thank me is by leaving a review. Your feedback means the world to me and lights me up every single time when I read it. And it makes me want to keep going. So please leave a review, and your review will also help other Christian women in leadership find the answers they are looking for. So whether you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the review section and leave that review. Then head over to womenoffaithinleadership.com and join our free Facebook community, and I look forward to engaging with you there.